Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading Adam of the Road, and I'll be beginning with chapter 12. And the picture we have here is of a man looking very puzzled, a woman looking concerned, a boy sound asleep on a dog. So we can assume that the boy is Adam, but the dog is not Nick. And since it's called the ferryman's house, I'm guessing the man is the ferryman, and the woman is probably his wife. So let's see. Adam stood there between the wood and the river, shivering in his wet clothes. He could go no further. His strength was spent. The little house beside the boat landing had a kindly look about it. Vines grew over its door and sunflowers in the garden. Dragging his weary feet, Adam walked up the path, knocked at the door. After a moment, he knocked again. No one answered. Now, if you recall, he was chasing Nick and Jankin, and he swam across the Way River trying to catch up with them, but he lost them. A dog came around the side of the house, an old hound with long ears and drooping cheeks and sad eyes. He sniffed Adam thoroughly and then slowly and deliberately wagged his tail, batting it gently against Adam's legs. Adam scratched him in the places that he liked best, behind the ears and under the chin. With a sigh, the old dog lowered himself bone by bone to the ground where there was a patch of sunlight and stretched out. Adam sat down in the sun beside him and tried to think. Somewhere ahead of him, pushing on through the forest, were Jankin and Nick. Somewhere behind him, beyond the river, was Roger. And here he was himself alone, wet, without harp or shoes or wallet, and deathly tired. He would just wait till Roger caught up with him. The sun was warm, the dog was friendly. Presently, Adam put his head down on the dog and went to sleep. Voices roused him. For a long time, it seemed, before he could really wake up, he heard them exclaiming over him. "Hey, will you look at that, sound asleep on old Collie? It's the boy that swam the river for his dog, poor lad. He looks done in. Lying there in those wet clothes. Come, boy, wake up." Somebody shook him in the shoulder, and the dog got out from underneath him. Wrenching his eyes open with main strength, he struggled to sit up. The woman on the landing, who had called him dearie, was bending over him. "Hey, that's better," she said. "Come into the house and sleep properly. See, I brought your things for you, your harp and shoes and wallet. Such a silly boy you were, thinking you could swim faster than the ferry." A man was with her, a man with red hair and a brown wool tunic. "That boy looks worn out," he said. "What's your name, lad, and how far have you come today?" "Adam, son of Roger, the minstrel, sir." He tried to think back to that morning, but it seemed 100 years ago. "We slept last night at Burford Bridge," he remembered at last. "Burford Bridge?" The woman gave a horrified squawk, and the man stooped and swung Adam up in his arms. He carried Adam into the house, where they peeled off his wet clothes, rolled him in a wet blanket, fed him hot bean pottage, and put him to bed in a little room upstairs where bunches of herbs were hung from the rafters to dry. The last thing Adam knew was the fragrance of those herbs and the sound of a kind voice saying, "Sleep well." He almost woke when the first cock crew. We would say crowed, but it says crew. And then again when the first party of pilgrims came to the river and called for the ferryman, but both times he rolled over and went back to sleep. When at length he opened his eyes and was all at once wide awake, he knew by the streaks of sunlight on the wooden wall and the daytime sounds below that the morning was well along. On a bench beside his bed, he saw his clothes spread out, washed and dried, his shoes cleaned, his belt neatly folded and the wallet laid on top of it, his harp on the floor propped against the wall. His first thought while he hurried into his clothes was that Roger had come and brought him his things. Doubtless he was even now downstairs waiting patiently for Adam to wake up. He hurried down some ladder-like steps that led to the room below, which, except for the sunshine and a few pieces of sturdy furniture, was empty. Out in the garden, he found the good wife tending her beehives. "Where's Roger?" he asked eagerly, without even stopping to say good morning. "Oh, come away from the bees. They don't know you." "Who is Roger?" "Roger the minstrel, my father. Is he here? How did my things come here?" "Oh, I brought them. No, lad, no minstrel has been here, except that one yesterday that had your dog. Are you sure your father knows where you are?" For the first time, it occurred to Adam that perhaps Roger did not know where he was. After all, he had just shouted and run, and it had been a very twisted way he followed, in and out among the barrels and back lanes and along the winding river path. Perhaps Roger did not know where he was. Perhaps he was hunting all over Guilford. "Oh," said Adam, aghast. "I never thought of that. Oh, I must go back to Guilford." Then he remembered that Jenkins and Nick had gone through the woods in the opposite direction. "Where does this road go?" he asked a little uncertainly. She took a stick and drew a map on the ground. "Now, here's Guilford and the bridge and the road to Farnham over the hill called Hog's Back. And here's the ferry up the river a bit from Guilford. And here's our house and our road. It runs through the wood to Whitewaysend, and there it joins the other road to Farnham." Adam told her about Nick and Bayard and Jenkins and how he'd lost Roger. She listened carefully, nodding her head from time to time. "Now, likely that Jenkins will go on to Farnham," she said. "It's a thriving town with plenty of folks to hear minstrels' tales. Likely he will stay several days when he thinks he's shaken you off. What you must do is go back to Guilford, find your father, and then you can go to Farnham together and find your dog." Well, it sounded wonderfully simple and easy as she said it. Adam took heart. "Here comes John Ferryman now for his dinner," said his wife. "You must eat with us before you go back to Guilford." Now, I don't know if you remember, I said this is happening in a time when people didn't typically have last names. But John apparently has taken on the name of his occupation. She called him John Ferryman, not John the Ferryman, but John Ferryman. Now, if he were to have a son, perhaps his son would be a farmer, but he would still be called Joseph Ferryman. We don't know. But this was the time when people started getting surnames, and one of the ways they got them was by their occupation. It was a happy house. John Ferryman and his wife, Jill, were strong and kind and neither young nor old. They loved each other and they worked hard. They liked living by the river, seeing all kinds of people from all kinds of places pass by their house. Their only sorrow was they had no children, so that's sad. After dinner, he gave them the one gift he had to give, even though it meant giving also time when he might have been looking for Roger. He played his harp and sang for them. He sang "Summer is a-comin' in" and "Merrily Sing the Monks of Ely." And then he sang the beautiful Latin hymn that he'd learned at St. Albans, Stabat Mater. After that, people came calling for the ferry, so Adam kissed Jill goodbye and thanked her, patted the old hound once more, and crossed the river with John. The last thing Jill said to him, calling out from where she stood among the sunflowers, was, "You'll find your father, but if you don't, come back later here." He wanted to give John one of the silver pennies left in his purse for putting him over the river, but the ferryman would not take it. "No, no, boy, keep your penny," said John affectionately, pulling Adam's cap down over his nose. "Come back to us soon and bring your father and your dog with you. That's a plucky lad," he added to a passenger with a chuckle. "Jumps into the river after his dog and swims it with all his clothes on." Adam planned as he walked briskly back along the path to Guilford just how he would find Roger. Probably they would just simply run into each other in the high street. "Well, where have you been?" "Well, looking for you. Where have you been?" Then they would set out for Farnham and Nick, and along the road Adam would tell Roger all about John Ferryman and Jill and how good they had been to him. When they found Nick, they would go back to the little house by the river, and Nick would do his tricks, and Roger would tell his best tales to John and Jill. Which would they like the most? Adam thought they would like the one about Sir Clegus and the cherries, because Sir Clegus was kind to everyone, and then when he was in need himself, he thanked God for all his past goodness instead of asking for more. And God wrought a miracle for him, and Jill would like that story. And so would John, because it had some funny parts too. So with his mind racing along as fast as his feet, Adam came soon to the high street in Guilford. Have you ever done that, gone for a walk, and you just kept thinking of things, and before you know it, you've reached your destination, and you don't know how you got there. You just were lost in your thought. Well, that's the way he was. Today was market day, and all Guilford was full of country folk who had brought their cheese and butter and vegetables and bacon and chickens to sell in town, and who wanted to take home town-made things for their houses. How could you find anyone in a crowd like this? Adam squeezed through the press and made his way up the steep high hill and down Quarry Street, and in and out of all the lanes between. Churchyards, inn-yards, marketplace, and shops. He did not miss one of them, and nowhere did he see anyone who looked like Roger. All the time he was aware of the castle, looming on its mound with its flint and sandstone tower rising high over the city. He and Roger had spoken of looking there for Jenkin. He was saving it to last, partly because he felt shy about going up to that great important building, and partly because he was beginning to be a bit frightened about Roger, and it made him feel safer to have the castle in reserve. At supper time, quaking a little inside, he went to the castle gate and knocked at the door. The porter, a fussy sort of man with a red face, came out and began to brandish his rod and wave him away without listening to what he said. "No place for boys, no boys wanted here," he barked, not unkindly. "Be off with you, get home to your supper." Adam stood his ground. "I'm a minstrel," he said firmly. "I have a right of entrance anywhere. Let me pass." "A minstrel?" A porter's eyes began to twinkle under his shaggy eyebrows. "A half-pint size like you? Well, you will have to prove it to me." Adam took his harp. How thankful he was that he had it. Suppose Jill had not guarded it for him and brought it to him. "Thus saith Alfred," he began, "at market and at church, make friends with poor and rich, with all men alike, then you will surely be happy and fair over the land wherever you will." The porter laughed. "Trying to make friends with me, are you? Well, you're still the smallest minstrel I ever saw." "Oh, I'm looking for my father, Roger the minstrel," said Adam. "Is he here?" "Roger, is it? Yes, he was here last night with a letter from his lord, but he's not here now. The sheriff is away, but the bailiff sat at the high table and had minstrelsy till midnight. Your Roger pleased him well with his tales out of France. Roger slept in the hall last night, and this morning he went out early, and has not been back since." Adam's heart tumbled down into his toes. What an evening was with Roger telling tales till midnight, and Adam lost hunting Nick. Who was even more lost? Hadn't Roger even missed them? "Didn't he say," inquired Adam in a very small voice, "that he'd lost a dog or me?" "I had no talk with him myself. Come along." He drew Adam into the paved courtyard where he felt almost crushed by towering stone walls, and beckoned to a squire in a dark tunic who was crossing from one side to the other. "Did Roger Minstrel say anything last night about losing his boy?" "Did he indeed? He was asking every man he met. Had he seen a boy or a red spaniel or both? He was well nigh distracted till Sir Henry called him to order and told him to get on with his tale." Adam stepped forward. "I'm the boy." he said. The squire looked down at him and laughed. "Well, where's the dog?" he asked. "Where's Roger?" said Adam desperately. Realizing it was no laughing matter, the squire turned serious at once. "Oh, Roger's gone to Farnham. Someone brought word about noon today that fellow that took the dog had been on the Farnham road, and thinking the boy, that's you, is it, would be close on his heels, Roger set forthwith for Farnham." "Over the ferry?" said Adam, wondering how they'd missed each other. "No, over the bridge and the Hog's Back." "How far is it to Farnham?" said Adam, ready to start at once. "Oh, it's a good 9 miles. You'll have to wait till tomorrow." Adam thought of going back to Jill and John to spend the night, but if he did, he would be on the wrong road in the morning. He wanted to go to Farnham, the same road that Roger took. He stood there looking troubled while the squire and the porter exchanged glances over his head. "You take him into the hall and let him get some supper," said the porter, "and he can share my bed tonight. The world is over large for a pint-sized minstrel without his father or his dog." It was kind of them, but Adam did not enjoy it very much. It was not a cheerful sort of castle, even though the hall was decorated with wonderful fresco paintings by Master William the Florentine. The Lord Sheriff was seldom there, and the place had a neglected and careless sort of air. Because the tower was also used as a jail, there were guards everywhere, and they made a great deal of noise, clanking about and shouting to each other and reminding you that shut away behind thick walls were men who'd lost their freedom. Supper was ample and good enough, but afterward the bailiff called on Adam for some minstrelsy, and they all laughed even before he began. They laughed again at his songs and called for drinking songs instead. It was kind of the porter to share his bed, but it would have been still kinder if he had not snored loudly all night long. Adam lay awake, clinging to the edge of the bed so as not to take more than his share, and missing Roger more and more with every minute that crawled slowly by. He was thankful when morning came, and he could set forth in the early freshness across the bridge and up the steep road that led over the Hog's Back to Farnham. Now I'm going to show you the map again, if I can find it here. And you will see right here is, I think am I going in the right direction? Yeah. Right here is the ferry, and this is Guilford, and they need to go over here, and this is called the Hog's Back. It's just some kind of a hill right here, Hog's Back, and they're going to Farnham. And you can see the ferry was a little ways away from the bridge, which makes sense. There would be no point in having a ferry if everybody could take the bridge. So anyway, so the next chapter is called Arrows in the King's Forest. And we see here what looks like a party of some kind with people and horses, and of course a deer. But one horse looks like there are 2 people on it. So hopefully one of those is Adam and he gets a ride through the King's Forest. Well, we'll find out tomorrow. Bye-bye.